So by the time somebody gets to me, they're either in the thorniest situation. Peter Adler, who's a wonderful colleague of all of ours, we call them public policy pickles. So these pickles have come about because good, smart people have really strong differences of opinion about what the right outcome is to complicated, highly scientific, technical policy and legal situations. So they're there for good reason. And they're not the type of people who, like my community disputes, were just trying to, anger their neighbors or, feud for decades just because they were mad at each other. But their agendas come with very deeply complex issues that go with them. And so if I'm contacted one way or another, it's on a spectrum of people have already noticed this is likely to happen, and they're trying to be proactive. So they're trying to do negotiated rulemaking, or they're trying to do a collaborative effort to design something, or it's later in the process and they've already gotten stuck and they've sued each other and they're in the middle of litigation and they want to get out of it, or they're way down the road to where it's become intractable and it's decades. A couple of the things I have right now are decades old, and somebody else said, can't you please just come in and help? People that do this kind of work like to have the chance to do what we call a convening phase, a feasibility assessment, or some type of an interview process, and we're not always allowed to do this, that allows us to learn up on the situation. And I often call it warming up the topic. It's an opportunity for people in a one-on-one setting. Sometimes I do them in small group settings. Sometimes I've only been able to do it with the whole group all at once in a public setting. And I sometimes get months and months to do these things. I sometimes get a few days or weeks. So I'm flexible in the how, but if I'm afforded the opportunity, what I want to do is ask a series of questions. I want to be in my neutrality, coming in from a place of newness to the situation, such that they get to tell a story. And I have a list of questions that I ask people. I always ask them the same questions. I slightly modify based on the situation, but it's around 10 questions. Who are you? What are your roles and affiliations? What's made you a part of this process? What are your core interests? What matters to you deeply? Why is this important to you? What are the key issues that you think are making this situation challenging? What are the obstacles that are interfering with your own ability to work it through? What have you already tried? What's gotten you stuck? What are ideas to get unstuck? I have a bunch of process questions, ideas and suggestions for process. And I ask a lot of questions about information, important data, technical, science-based information that they have or they don't have, and what do those gaps do? And then what would it look like if they didn't do a process like this? What are your fears or worst case scenarios? I call that the good, the bad, and the ugly question that I ask people to share so that I can get a feel for, the what ifs, the alternatives to some kind of a negotiated settlement. And then a whole bunch of other questions that kind of help me wrap up logistics. But it is amazing. Within an hour, and sometimes multiple hours with multiple amounts of these kinds of interviews, what that does as a neutral is it gives me, I often call it the kaleidoscope of information, that if you were to shift the kaleidoscope in just gently and tiny different ways, you start to see the fullness and the richness of the situation rather than one linear lens that you were brought in with. Absolutely. People regularly say how cathartic it is. First of all, they're like, I've never had a chance to quite talk about this in this way. I feel better. So there's a moment of this, they have this kind of flash of, aha, like, I've never had a chance to really tell the story quite in this way. So in and of itself, there's a kind of an emotional catharsis that helps. There's also just this a deeper understanding of their own situation, because it's not just that it's therapy. It's unusual to get a chance to be asked open-ended questions and have the time and the opportunity to think about it and then answer. For those of us that come out of the school of both the Harvard Negotiation Project and Getting to Yes, Larry Susskind's multifaceted collaborative problem-solving methods, a lot of these great mentors and teachers that some of us were raised with, we just see this as regular ways that we, of course, do our business and think. But for folks that haven't come out of those kinds of trainings or having those kinds of principles in their minds, it is often a very linear process when it comes to conflict. I'm winning or I'm losing. They're right or they're wrong. I'm with them or I'm against them. And it's very hard standing in your own shoes to step out and think in this kind of multifaceted way.